Good morning. We're going to give everyone just a minute to join. Great. We'll just give folks another 30 seconds to join before we get started. Okay. Well, we will continue to let everyone in as they join this morning, but we want to stay true to our time today, so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us, first of all, on a summer Friday. My name is Adrienne Harrison, and I serve as the Catalyst Program Manager at NBRC. So welcome to the first in a series of targeted workshops to support those that are interested in applying for NBRC funding programs. And this is the first in a series focused on helping interested applicants pull together the best pre-applications and applications possible. And we're really focused today on supporting the project development phase and provide direction on the tools and resources that NBRC has available, as well as the people you may want to connect with as you develop your project concept. Today, we are recording our session, so this will be made available along with the slides. Also, if along the way you have questions or you want to even make suggestions for the types of tools or resources that would be helpful to you, feel free to use the chat box. We have our colleague Sarah Lang on the line here with us today, and she's going to be tracking those questions and comments in the chat box. I'll also remind everyone to please mute your line so that we can cut down on any feedback. And finally, before we get started, Marina Bowie is also joining as a co-host for today's workshop. She serves as the program manager for the Timber for Transit and Forest Economy programs at NBRC. And so you'll hear from both of us today. We'll both be together guiding you through the workshop and covering these topics related to your project concept. If you want to go to the next slide, Marina. So here's a brief overview of what we plan to cover today. We will not be covering the pre-application in any depth. I will remind you, and you'll see a few times today, that we do have a pre-recorded webinar on the pre-application as an information session for each of our programs available on our website. And we'll share links for all those resources along the way. But that's where you can go to really get a deeper dive on our programs and the details for those programs. So today will not be in depth on how to put on what the pre-application is, but we do have resources available for that. Today, again, we'll be going over a brief review of what our competitive programs are and our timeline and those program resources out there. And then really spending most of our time on this developing a project concept topic, how to go through the steps, what our resources and tools are, when you should think about getting early feedback and who to reach out to for that feedback, as well as beginning to think about how to start completing that pre-application. Next slide. Okay, so briefly, do you want to go back to the timeline? Sorry. Oh, the timeline missing. Oh. The timeline's missing. We'll bring that up later. It was just really meant to highlight that basically upcoming we have, or is that later? Sorry. Okay. I'm out of order.
It might be
I'll
in
go
a few
over
slides. No worries.
I'll go over the Catalyst program overview, and the timeline I think is later in the order. I apologize. Okay, so Catalyst program, again, just a quick reminder to please mute yourselves. Thank you so much. Okay, Catalyst program overview. Many of you may be familiar with the Catalyst program. This is the primary economic development and infrastructure funding program at NBRC. And the purpose of this program is to stimulate economic growth and inspire partnerships that improve rural economic vitality in the region. And as you dig through our program resources and materials, I think it will become apparent that successful projects are really focused around that economic development component and really working to bring new workforce, new programs, new workforce development programs, the basic infrastructure that's required for a successful economy. Those types of projects tend to rise to the top because they really are addressing that core purpose of the program, focused on economic growth. Next slide. A quick recap of what's available for funding. So in total, in 2024, NBRC has made 50 million available through the Catalyst program. The first round of funding has concluded, and 27 million of that was awarded in the spring round. So we have a minimum of 20 million available in the fall round. That number will likely be more like 23 to make up the difference from the spring round. And we're really excited to kick things off here today for our fall funding round for all of our programs. I will mention that we just revised our Catalyst program user manual, and that is live on our website as of today. And there are some great details in that resource, the program user manual, focused on, again, that sort of what are the qualifying sort of project categories under the Catalyst program, and really providing some examples and in-depth information on those types of projects that are viable through the Catalyst program. Okay, I think I'm handing it over to Marina to cover two of our programs.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Marina Bowie. I serve as the Forest Economy and Timber for Transit Program Manager at NBRC. I'll first cover the Forest Economy Program. So for this program, of the 4 million that we made available in the start of 2024 for both rounds, we have $3 million remaining for the fall grant round. The Forest Economy Program is designed to support the forest-based economy and to assist in the industry's evolution to include new technologies and viable business models. There are 5 project categories within this program, including community development, workforce training and development, business planning and technical assistance, marketing and communication work. Although that category must be paired with one of the other categories. And then public infrastructure projects that directly support the forest economy. The recorded Forest Economy Program information session is available online and includes some examples of past funded projects that address each of the outlined funding categories. This program is also supported by a 9-member advisory board, and later in this presentation we'll touch on more on the advisory board and their role and how best to utilize them as a resource in your project development. The Timber for Transit program is new to NBRC this year. It's a new offering, and it's designed to advance the use of domestic forest products in transportation infrastructure. Of the 25 million NBRC will make available over the next 3 years, NBRC spent 2.7 million for 2 projects in the spring grant round. All right, so a little more on this already covered, but again, this program seeks to kind of showcase the capabilities of wood in transportation infrastructure. And just like all of our programs, we have a program recorded information session and program materials online. Adrian mentioned that the Catalyst program user manual is online as of this morning. The same goes for the Forest Economy program and Timber for Transit programs. Here's the timeline.
Yes, here's the timeline. So a quick reminder that the fall funding round has is starting now in terms of the project development phase. Our grants management system will open to begin accepting pre-applications on August 15th. That's when you'll be able to get into the system, submit your information and your pre-applications. Pre-applications are required to receive an invitation to apply for the full program. And September 6th is our deadline for pre-applications for the fall funding round. That's also the same deadline for any waiver requests that you may want to submit as part of your pre-application. We will not be going into any details on the waivers in this session. Again, I'll remind you of the information sessions. We do cover all of the waivers there. And you will hear back on your pre-applications by September 20th in terms of if you're issued an invitation to apply or recommended to reapply at a future date. And I just want to reinforce that this session is really going to hit you with a lot of resources. And so this is sort of our first resource slide. Many of the things we've talked about already, the user manual, the information sessions, they are all available through our program pages. And I've put a link in our chat as well to the program areas page where you can access each of our funding programs. There's also links on this slide to our distress criteria, the LDD resources webpage, which is particularly important for the Catalyst program, as well as the state economic development strategies. Those are really key for the Catalyst program and definitely useful for the Forest Economy and Timber for Transit programs as well. Next, thank you. Okay, I think this goes back to Marina.
Yeah, so this next section will cover kind of the key pieces to developing a project concept specifically for NBRC programs. Again, we won't do a deep dive into eligibility or the program user manuals. Those are all available to you on the website and in those resources that Adrian mentioned, but rather walking through a step-by-step guide to developing your concept and the strongest concept and proposal that you can for this round. So additional information on eligibility is available in the program user manuals and in the program information sessions online. But to summarize, projects must be eligible in 3 ways. The applicant must be located in, or the project activities must occur in an eligible location. Annually, NBRC analyzes the level of economic distress in each of our counties located within the NBRC service area. Counties are either designated as distressed, transitional, or attainment counties, and each designation informs the percentage of match required for that given project. Second, the applicant must be an NBRC eligible entity, so either a 501c nonprofit or trade association, a state or local government, secondary or career technical center, a native tribe, or an institute of higher education. And third, the project activities must be eligible for funding and fit the program categories or project classifications associated with the funding program you're applying to. So your first step is to confirm eligibility and then select the appropriate NBRC program. So be sure to review the available programs and determine the appropriate fit and alignment for your project. So does your concept align with Forest Economy Program, Timber for Transit Program, or the Catalyst Program? And where does it fit? So identify those project categories that are most applicable to your project idea. You'll want to reference them in your proposal. You'll also want to look to the maximum award sizes. We have different maximum awards for each of the programs, so you can find that information in those materials that we've been referencing. And if you're not sure if your project or where it will be most competitive, you can contact us at admin@nbrc.gov. And I think we want to pause here to get a little engagement with you all. So if there's anyone who has a project concept and is not sure where it might fit in terms of which program, we'd love to hear from you and we will help to categorize it live. Any brave souls want to tell us about your project? Yeah, I see, Donald, your hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have a question so much about categorization as award size. I read in the Catalyst program overview, it sounds like for projects that meet 2 of the construction criteria or categories, the award size is different. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yes, I can explain. The higher maximum infrastructure determination is what we call that. But yeah, in plain speak, it's really an incentive or an opportunity to go above our $1 million typical maximum award size for infrastructure projects to that new threshold of $3 million as a maximum award size. There are sort of 2 conditions that you could meet to reach that maximum award size of 3 million. The first is if the infrastructure project, so if one of our basic infrastructure categories and you're doing a construction project within those categories, if that construction takes place in 2 or more jurisdictions, so that could be 2 towns, 2 counties, 2 states, but we're looking for the physical construction to take place in 2 or more jurisdictions. That is one way you can meet the higher maximum infrastructure determination. The other way is if your project includes 2 types of infrastructure categories. So if you dig into our user manual, you'll see that there are 4 basic categories of infrastructure. And if your project includes construction in 2 or more of those categories, so you could have a a basic public infrastructure project such as a water um, infrastructure upgrade combined with a transportation type project, a transportation system of some sort. Sometimes that would look like new water delivery services, new water pipes in the ground alongside of road construction or sidewalk construction projects where you're kind of reaching some sort of efficiency by combining 2 types of infrastructure projects at the same time. So those are the 2 ways that you can meet that higher maximum infrastructure, either one infrastructure type project in 2 or more locations or jurisdictions, or 2 or more infrastructure types, and that can be in the same jurisdiction.
So our project is exactly the example you gave. It includes both basic public and transportation. So it goes from 1 million as a max to 3 million then. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes. And I will also highlight that the frequently asked questions document for the Catalyst program has a really detailed sort of decision tree on how to classify your project, which includes details on this higher maximum infrastructure determination. And I'll stick that in the chat.
Sarah, your hand is raised.
Hi, yes, I'm going to ask a question. If you have a project that is maybe a infrastructure building that's going to use cross-laminated timbers as part of that building, would that be a project for Catalyst, or would that be a project for FEP, the Forest Economy Program?
It would be a project for the Forest Economy Program if it's not a transportation adjacent infrastructure or building. So thank you, Sarah. Sarah's on our NBRC team, so she's asking a good clarifying question. Mass timber projects such as like a highway rest stop, which is technically a transportation adjacent, or maybe an airport project that includes mass timber infrastructure, would be a timber for transit project. If that construction was unrelated to transportation entirely, that would be a great project for the Forest Economy Program. One thing I will highlight for the Forest Economy Program, and this information is in our info session, is that for that program with mass timber, we're encouraging folks to use locally sourced wood species for that mass timber. So if folks have questions about that, I'm happy to answer separately. Thank you, Sarah. What do you think, Adrian? Do you want to try to do one more categorization?
Sure, let's do one more, and then we're also happy to take more questions towards the end of our session.
Great. Charlene, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask the question, but back to this two infrastructure thing, or the two county request, is probably where I want to make sure I'm clear on what those requirements may be. The project we're looking at is based in one county, but it's going to be comprised of a consortium of folks who are working on this. And so the benefits could extend to 3 counties, because of the revenue streams resulting from the project would go back to these other people who are part of the consortium to stimulate other economic development activity. So would that count as 2 county, or I'm just trying to understand that requirement?
Yeah, so the first requirement is that the project is an infrastructure project. So making
Yeah, that
sure
is.
it's a construction project within one of our infrastructure categories. And then the second is that the physical construction of that infrastructure takes place in 2 or more jurisdictions. So it's not so much where the benefits accrue. We realize many of our projects have benefits that are felt far beyond their actual physical location, but it is in this case the physical construction or the infrastructure asset being developed in 2 or more jurisdictions.
And what is the definition of jurisdictions?
So it really is pretty broad. It could be municipalities, it could be counties, it could be states. It's not multiple places within one community or one municipality, but it is multiple communities or multiple counties or states.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, well, thanks for participating and asking your questions. Again, feel free to use our chat box for additional questions. If we don't get to them on today's session, we will be sure to reach out with responses as well. I'm going to go ahead and move along to identifying this next step in our process of identifying relevant program priorities. So once you've classified your project by program and then by category, your next step is really to dig into what the ultimate purpose of those programs are and some of the priorities that NBRC has put in their materials, as well as the state priorities. And to really make those connections between your project components and those priorities, especially at the pre-application stage. Those pre-applications and your project will be reviewed in terms of alignment with the program priorities. So I'll give an example that's highlighted here, really about the Catalyst program, and we'll see a lot of projects come in and applications for projects that are eligible. They meet all of the requirements. They are, the appropriate eligible entity, and they're in the right place, and they're part of one of our project categories. But then we're sort of left hanging. Like, what is that real connection to economic development, to improving rural vitality in our region? And that, I think, is really what we wanted to focus on today, is highlighting that you as the applicant telling us how this project will contribute to your economy is really one of the most important parts of the pre-application. We'll, of course, at a later session, go through some of the nitty-gritties on, some of the details that we really are looking for in terms of budgets and match and things like that. But in terms of the core storyline and the project description and all of the narrative responses, we are really looking for, and I know our state partners are really looking for, that connection to, for Catalyst, their state economic development priorities and the NBRC program priorities around economic development. So this to us was really important to reinforce. I think we can go to the next slide. Actually, I'll just take a moment to pause before we go into these details. That if there are any, if Marina, if you wanted to emphasize any points around program priorities with FEP or Timber for Transit, feel free. Or if there are any state program managers, I forgot to mention that we're really lucky to have 3 of our states represented on our call today. I believe we have Kyle Wilbur from New York, as well as Christy Farnham and Elizabeth Nance from Vermont, and Ian. Oh my gosh, Ian. I'm sorry. I just lost your last name.
No problem. Ian Davis.
Ian Davis, thank you. Ian is the new state program manager for New Hampshire, and we're really happy to have everyone online today. But this would be, no pressure. Do not feel like you have to come offline. But I wanted to highlight that you're here. We'll talk more about the state program role in a few slides, but this is one of the points that I think states try to drive home every year as well, is really making that connection, that direct alignment with program priorities.
I'll just add, Adrian, for,
Adrian, I was just gonna, this is Kyle. I'm not sure how many New Yorkers are on, but thanks for the introduction. And yeah, I mean, the state priorities, the state alignment is pretty clear in the guidance. I would just add for New York, we are very highly oversubscribed. So, we had 30 requests for debriefs from last round, and we have limited staff, so we'll do our best to try to get back to everybody, but the most important thing is to apply and read the criteria. But in reality, we may not be able to answer everybody's questions, so just a point of order. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. Marina, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that for the Catalyst program, you'll see that there are separate scoring criteria for the states. And that is not the case for the Forest Economy and Timber for Transit program. For those programs, all states score the applications and they use the same scoring criteria. So while the state priorities aren't embedded in that scoring criteria for those programs, it's still important that you are making the connection with your state's overarching priorities.
Great. Thank you. Okay, next slide for real now. Okay, so after you've put some time into connecting with the project priorities, or maybe even simultaneously, you'll want to be thinking about who will act as the lead applicant for your project. NBRC offers an applicant and a co-applicant option. A co-applicant is not required. An applicant, of course, is required. So you'll want to go through the process of identifying, who is the eligible organization that will be applying for the project. And once you have that identified, you'll also want to make sure you work to identify who your authorized official is. This is the person who will be responsible for committing that organization to an agreement with NBRC and for signing sort of all of the important financial and governing documents. You'll also be able to identify a project manager role or an alternate project contact. And our grants management system right now is limited to those two contacts. And one of them, of course, must be the authorized official. If you decide that a co-applicant is a good choice for your project, then you can also enter the information for the co-applicant. Co-applicants are treated equally as applicants, so they also must be an eligible entity, and any of their activities will be subject to kind of the same review process in terms of the National Environmental Policy Act review. They're treated equally. The applicant, however, is the only entity that can receive a direct reimbursement from NBRC. So all sort of reimbursements to the co-applicant will flow through the applicant, much like a subcontract. One of the advantages of considering a co-applicant is that because they've been part of the application process, they would not need to go through any sort of competition or procurement process to be secured as someone that receives funds for this project. So that's really truly the biggest advantage of going in as a co-applicant, if you know that this entity will be a strong partner and receiving funds, and that's really the purpose of the co-applicant. Also, this is a great time during project development to identify who your local development district is. For the Catalyst program, the use of a local development district for grant administration services is required unless you submit an LDD waiver. Again, all of the waiver information is in our program manual. But those local development districts, while they are our key partner for grant administration services, sort of after the award process, they may also have resources available to help you develop your application. Not all LDDs offer those services, but it's worth reaching out and saying you're interested in applying for an NBRC program, and do they have services available for project development. You might also want to consider reaching out to folks that might provide letters of support for your application and really trying to document the impact this project would have on your community sort of early on in the pre-application process. Did I see a hand go up? Was there a question?
Yeah, I had one. My name's John
Great.
Gilson. Hello. I'm up in Coos County in New Hampshire. I found on your website the listing of LDDs that were available and found literally none for New Hampshire. And I was wondering if there's any clarification available either from Ian Davis or from the NBRC.
Well, so that's Sarah Lang maybe just put a bug in your ear on that. We do have local development districts in New Hampshire. But I will say that for New Hampshire in particular, they have developed, and we haven't quite gotten to that slide, but they have developed a technical assistance website and program. And that is a incredible resource available to eligible locations in New Hampshire, such as Coas,
That's
to
the
go through.
BEA. That's the BEA
Yes.
website.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I highly recommend starting there if you haven't already. And then in terms of LDDs.
If I can jump in on this one.
Oh, sure. Thanks.
Yeah. So the technical assistance website is nbrc-nh.com. That's being run through our contractor. That's why it's a .com and not a .gov. When you pull down that LDD contact info Excel file, there's multiple tabs. There's a main tab, a New Hampshire tab, New York and Vermont. And if you click into the New Hampshire tab, you'll find that North Country Council is your LDD. That's all of Coos County is covered by them.
Great. Thank you. I didn't see those tabs, which is hilarious. Thanks, Ian.
I
kid you not,
I did the exact thing. Yeah, I did that 2 days ago. I pulled it down to recheck it and I was like, there's none in New Hampshire. And yeah, it happens.
Got it. Thank you.
And we will put that New Hampshire website in the chat. It's also in our slide deck, so you will have access to that in multiple places. Thanks for asking that question.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay,
And
next slide. Oops, go ahead.
if you don't mind, Adrian, I just wanted to add that local development districts are not required for forest economy and timber for transit projects unless at the pre-application stage NBRC finds that you might benefit from those services. So a waiver is not required at pre-application. That's the LDD waiver.
Okay, so the next resource we're going to walk through is really designed to help you start to outline these project details. This is our project interest form. The project interest form is not the pre-application. It is an optional tool available to sort of help you provide that critical information that state program managers or the advisory board members might be looking for. Well, they're definitely looking for when you go to have any sort of early project development meeting with those folks. So this tool is available on the NBRC website. It's a fillable PDF. If you go to the next slide, we've got a little, an image of what it looks like. It's a 3-page PDF. And again, it's really meant to help you think through those like early information pieces that are helpful as you develop your project and as you start to communicate with state programs and advisory board members. It's helpful for them to know how you view your project kind of fitting within the program and that project classification scheme we have for our programs. In addition to helping you with NBRC, our state contacts and our advisory board contacts, they work with all sorts of other programs that may be either a better fit or you may be able to combine with NBRC funding. So it's really great if you can share this level of information that's outlined in the project interest form with those folks before you meet. That way you're not spending your time with them really focusing on like what is your project in terms of the NBRC classification, or what are the amounts you qualify for in terms of maximum awards. You want to spend your time with those state contacts and with those experts from the advisory board, getting sort of that feedback in terms of what could strengthen your project connections to priorities, maybe even gather more information on the types of needs that could be addressed through a program like you're suggesting. So use those meetings to add value to your project and come to those meetings with your details kind of ironed out in terms of how you fit into the NBRC programs. Next slide. And these are the resources that I've mentioned. We, again, use our program user manuals are kind of like the Bible for each of our programs, excuse the reference. This is like the main source of all of the program details. It can seem probably a little overwhelming when you first open it. They're many, many pages long, but hopefully the table of contents is useful for you to jump to the places that you want to further evaluate. This is where you will find all of the eligibility requirements, all of the details on the program and state priorities. And then in addition to the user manuals, I did not somehow get the link to the project information interest form on this slide, but it was linked on the previous slide. So sorry, they're not all together. There's also links to the state economic development strategies. We also really recommend that you make connections to other plans that may be relevant to your project idea, your project concept. Local economic plans, climate action plans, maybe even hazard mitigation plans, things of that nature that can help document the need for that type of project and that there's a real demand for your project. Those are great alternate plans to connect to. And then again, that local development district webpage we have. Christy, did you want to add something?
I think the timing is good for this. Hi, Christy Farnham. I'm
Sure.
the state program manager here in Vermont. It's great to see so many familiar faces on the line today. I am unable to enter notes into the chat, so I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware that if you are a Vermont prospect, the state of Vermont uses a project called the Regional Project Priority List process to elevate folks in the competition as priorities for investment, as sponsored by the county that the project is headquartered in. That is up on the Agency of Commerce and Community Development's website if folks are interested to know if they are a featured priority. And I also wanted to let folks know in response to one of the questions that was in the chat, in Vermont, we have 4.5 million left for the fall competition. We had some great projects come into the spring round and we overspent our spring budget to promote those through the process. And then finally, there was a question in the chat about whether or not states invite all folks that submit a pre-application. And here in Vermont, we definitely do not do that. If we don't anticipate a project is going to be competitive in a competition, we will not, drag them through the rigors of an application if we don't think that there's a potential that they would access a prize. And we'll continue to give folks feedback and answer questions as the competitions approach. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Christy. Sorry you're having trouble with the chat this morning. All right, well, we'll keep moving along. The next section is on getting early feedback from program contacts. So it can be really helpful in the project development process before you get too far down the line to get some feedback from states. Like if Christy says that your project might not be a good fit for an NBRC program or won't be competitive, then it does make sense that a state would guide you not to go through the rigorous process, but it can be really helpful to get some early feedback. And we have people available to help provide that feedback, including NBRC staff, our state program managers, who help to score proposals, and as I mentioned earlier, that 9-member Forest Economy Program Advisory Board. The Forest Economy Program Advisory Board is comprised of forest sector experts who provide their expertise and feedback on proposals for states to consider as they score applications. So those folks are really great to connect with early on. So the appropriate contact depends on the program and the type of feedback you're looking for. So before you reach out to a program contact, be sure to review the program materials, including our FAQ documents, and make sure you're reaching out to the correct person in terms of your question. NBRC can be a great contact for questions related to eligibility, program requirements, federal regulations, or project administration. So if you have questions about how your project will be reimbursed, or the specifics about required match, if you have questions after reading through the manuals, those are all great NBRC specific questions, and we're happy to answer those. We have lots of eyes at our admin@nbrc.gov email account, so we'll be sure to be timely and responsive to your questions. The state program managers are available as contacts as well. Be sure before you reach out to these folks to confirm that your project is eligible for NBRC funding. If you have questions about eligibility, please reach out to us. And these folks can be great in providing some feedback. I'll pause here, and Adrian, I don't know if you want to chime in on the specific resources. We have covered a little bit of this for each state, but each of our states has developed a different approach to providing feedback.
Right. Yes. So we've started to kind of get into this already, and it's been great to have our state programs jump in with their thoughts along the way. So again, we have this project interest form available. Maine has provided an email address that they ask all of the interested programs to send those project interest forms to. It's bizawards.decd@maine.gov. This is so that multiple people can access your interest forms and set meetings and follow up with you. If it just goes to one person, that it could just delay a response. So they really ask that you use this email address to send your interest forms to. New Hampshire, again, we've highlighted that they have a technical assistance program available. They really encourage folks to kind of enter into that process with the state program managers through this technical assistance website. You'll be, and I'm sure Ian could describe this more eloquently, but essentially once your project is entered into this system, you're going to be paired with some technical assistance support through their contract that they have with the RNet group. So you're going to get multiple sources to support your project there. And then New York, you heard from Kyle earlier. Right now it's set up that if you would like to get feedback on your project, likely these meetings are only, going to be 15 to 30 minutes long. So you're going to want to really be ready to take advantage of that time with Kyle. And you can send those to his email address. And the same with Vermont. You can send those forms, your interest in a meeting, directly to Christy, who you also heard from on the call today. And that's for the Catalyst program in particular. I think that's also the same for Timber for Transit. Is that true, Marina?
Yeah, I think the project interest form is set up to address all of our programs, so you can kind of identify where your project fits within the interest form. And there's a section at the very bottom where you can list any questions you might have for your state. So that's a great place to just get questions in ahead of a meeting or through email to get some feedback from them. And it allows them to come into your meeting prepared to discuss your project. All right. I mentioned this Forest Economy Program Advisory Board and just wanted to offer their contact information here. It's also in our program materials, but again, these folks are well-versed in kind of the status of the forest economy across the 4 states. We convene them regularly to talk about projects. So these are great contacts for you if you need kind of regional context. That can be really helpful to support your application. And then also things like sector impact of your project. These are great resources for you. And I will just mention that these folks across the board have various expertise across the forest products economy. So if you're a main project, but a forester's perspective might be better for you, there's nothing to keep you from reaching out to someone like Charlie Hancock in Vermont or Daniel Bearhide in New York. So depending on the type of expertise you need, you might look across the states to get some information from advisory board members. All right, and once again, we're offering lots of resources here. So that project interest form, program user manuals, the FAQ documents on the website. You might even look at the program user manual ahead of any meetings you have with our program contacts to look at the pre-application requirements. And then, of course, those literal people that are available to you, NBRC staff, our state programs, and advisory board members.
Thanks, Marina. Okay, so we're moving on towards preparing to create your pre-application. So again, the grants management system will not open for you to actually, in that system, input your information into the pre-application format and submit the pre-application. So that'll be August 15th. But in advance of that system opening, there are things that you can do to prepare to get to that point where you're entering information into the pre-application in the grants management system. So we'll go over registering in the grants management system, outlining your pre-application responses, sort of outside of the pre-application system, pre-application in the grants management system, and then also preparing to better understand NEPA through the resources that we have. So next slide. Okay, so all applicants will need to be registered in the grants management system. If you are already registered in our system, you do not need to do that again. So if you submitted a application in the fall, you should have a valid registration for the, I'm sorry, if you submitted an application as part of the spring round, you should be registered for the fall round. Of course, if you go to enter the GMS and you get some sort of error message, you can go ahead and re-register. But if you are an existing user, you should not need to re-register. New users will need to register. So if you have not interacted with our new grants management system yet, if you did not submit a pre-application or application in the spring round, you will need to register. And the system will open in early August for registration. So you'll want to go ahead and check back in after the first week of August or so and begin that registration process. It can take, 1 or 2 business days, depending on when that request comes in. It is something that NBRC staff reviews to confirm eligibility. So it does take an actual person reviewing it. And so that again, depending on the time when the request comes in, it could be 1 or 2 business days. And there is guidance on our website available to walk you through that registration process. We have a step-by-step guidance document. And again, there's a link here in our slides. It's available on our resources webpage of the NBRC site. Thank you for asking that question. I see from Donald Lessier. Yes, the authorized official should be the person registering in as the applicant in the grants management system. That person can then add a project manager or alternate project contact. But it should be completed, the initial registration should be completed by the authorized official. And that is also detailed in this guidance document. So highly recommend going into that guidance document, having it open when you access our system to register so that you have all of the information available to you. Next. Okay, so in our program user manuals, there is a section devoted to the pre-application. And in that section of the manual, there's a lot of information. It goes through all of the details that are asked of you in the pre-application and provides guidance on how to respond, what we're looking for. And in particular, there are 5 narrative questions, and each of the programs have slightly different guidance on the type of information that they're looking for in those narrative spaces provided in the pre-application. So again, I really highly recommend going to those user manuals, following along all of that pre-application guidance. And you can draft all of those narrative responses outside of the grants management system, then copy and paste them in once the system is open. So you can start doing this now. You can begin drafting your project abstract. You can draft your statement of need, your goals and outcomes. All of that information is available to you in our user manuals. We will also, our next workshop session next Friday, August 2nd, same time next week, we will be looking at some of those key elements that are asked for in the pre-application and providing, additional guidance and additional sort of examples of what we're really looking for and what helps us understand the status and readiness of your project. And you can feel free to come to that meeting next week with, some draft content, and we can workshop that with you. But we will be prepared to share examples of, what we'd like to see in those spaces. And finally, we really recommend that in the in the project development stage, you take a closer look at the NEPA requirements at NBRC. All projects are required to complete environmental review, the National Environmental Protection Act. We are required to do that review for all of our projects. And we have an entire webpage devoted with a presentation and other resources available to help you understand how this review process could impact your project timeline. And it's really important to NBRC that we communicate this to you early and often throughout the process, that NEPA may take a few weeks for projects that are more of a program and they don't involve any construction or any renovation to facilities, to a few months for those projects that may have sort of limited impact to the ground or to a building, up to 6 to 12 months for a project that does have substantial construction, new construction, and impacts on the ground. So the process can add some time to your project, and we never like to catch people off guard when you have some pressing deadlines with the fact that we do have to complete NEPA. So it's really important to us that you understand, you take the time to review this, and that you communicate how you feel NEPA will impact your timeline in your materials. Again, this is all outlined on our website, but we like to take the time to just communicate that early during the project development process. Okay, we are going to go through some of our common feedback that we see from pre-applications from our state program managers, as well as from our NBRC staff when we're reviewing pre-applications and applications. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll start with sharing some feedback that we often have for the Catalyst program. First, one of the really common notes we have at the time of pre-application is reclassifying a project to a different category. And so this is just a reminder to really take a close look at how you feel your project aligns with the different project categories and the different award sizes. Feel free, if you're unsure, to reach out to NBRC through our admin@nbrc.gov email address, and we can help clarify how your project should be classified. It's still possible your project gets reclassified because you're providing more details, or we're better understanding how NBRC funds will be used. And so that can still happen, even if you feel like you understand our project categories really well. But that is a common piece of feedback that we have for projects at this stage. You will then, if your project is reclassified, you'll be invited to apply at that award amount. So if it changes from an infrastructure to a non-infrastructure, you'll be asked to apply at that non-infrastructure amount of $500,000. The use of funds and expected match, that's an area we often provide feedback on at the pre-application stage. Some of the common sort of questions or areas that we ask folks to clarify in their full application are around ownership. So really confirming that a facility or an asset, a piece of equipment, will be owned by an eligible entity during its useful life. So really trying to understand the ownership associated with property. A description of how NBRC funds will be used. Sometimes the projects, the pre-applications will focus on an overall sort of larger project, and it can be hard to decipher, well, what will this $1 million or $500,000 from NBRC actually be doing? And so that's another really key piece of advice, is to really make it easy for all of us to understand what will result from NBRC funds? How will those be used to contribute to a project, to contribute to your goal? Sometimes it's really clear, like NBRC funds are the only funds in the project. Sometimes NBRC funds are just a piece of a larger funding stack. And so we like to really understand what contribution NBRC funds are bringing to that project. Sometimes we'll flag a project for potential ineligible costs. Ineligible costs are things that would not be eligible for reimbursement by NBRC and or could not count as match or cost share for the project. Ineligible costs can be things like funds that have already been spent or committed that you're including in your project budget. So maybe you already have a contract with an engineering firm. Those costs would not be eligible to include for reimbursement or as match or cost share for NBRC award. Maybe it's a cost that's associated with directly going to a ineligible entity, so a pass through to a for-profit business. That would be an eligible cost. You can go through our program user manual and we have a list of ineligible costs, typical ineligible costs. And so you'll just want to be aware of those as you're developing your project details. And finally, in this category, we may need, more information on where your other funding sources are coming from. It's not required that you have all of your match necessarily committed, especially not at the time of pre-application, but it is really important to NBRC and many of our state programs to see that you've identified where you're going to get that project match from. So you could have a minimum match requirement that you're fulfilling from your organization, or maybe you've gone out for another foundation grant, another federal grant. It's really important to us to know that you've accounted for identifying all of the funding for your project. If there are sources that you haven't identified yet, it's great to also highlight that. So, you might have 25,000 that's, you're not sure yet, you're still working on, and that's okay to put in there. But we like to see that you've thought through that your project does require additional funds and you have identified real or potential sources for those funds. Next, again, we're going back to that connecting to your economic development strategies and that real, for Catalyst, again, that real economic impact for your region or your community, and trying to provide, in your pre-application, you should provide the clearest description as possible of the expected economic impacts from your project. It's great when you can clarify where those economic impacts will happen. Where you expect those impacts to accrue. Is it just at the site where your project will happen, or do you expect a broader regional impact? So really describe where you expect your project to affect. And then again, alignment with those state priorities. That's probably the biggest piece of feedback from our state managers in the Catalyst program is, take a look at our state economic development strategies, our regional priority lists, all of those resources to show alignment with as many places as possible with those priorities. Next slide. Okay, and then from the NBRC side, I think I've already touched on this with NEPA. We're also really looking for you to show that you understand NEPA as a part of your timeline, and if there should be some costs set aside to support any environmental review process, that you've showed that in your budget as well. Again, NEPA is really important to NBRC. And similarly, because of our local development district requirement for grant administration services, we really place a lot of value that you, at the application stage especially, that you understand that 2% of your NBRC award, or the award from NBRC, is available to the LDDs to support those services. And again, information on all of that is in our user manual. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Marina.
All right, thank you. I'm having to toggle between screens here, so sorry about that. All right, moving to the Forest Economy Program and common feedback we see here. A lot of what Adrian already listed applies to FEP and Timber for Transit, so those NEPA costs and timeline considerations all are applicable there too. Make sure that you're demonstrating direct alignment with the investment priorities and project categories, and be sure to explain how your project, there was a question in the chat earlier about a forest management plan, and whether that would be eligible for forest economy funding. And the answer is yes, but does the forest management plan connect to those project categories and program investment priorities? And if it does, be sure to explain how it directly translates. And then often we have projects where it's not immediately clear how funds will be spent or whether funding is being passed through to an ineligible entity. So just same thing as Adrian said, wanting to be sure that the NBRC award is not going to be passed to a business to buy a boiler or something. That would be an ineligible cost. If you're not sure whether costs are eligible, please be sure to review the program manual and FAQ docs. And if it's still unclear, of course, feel free to reach out to NBRC. Let's see. And then, as Adrian stated, the economic impacts to the sector and the region. So for the Forest Economy Program, again, those advisory board members are great resources for kind of the sector impact and also an understanding of the regional context. So you might like to connect with them to understand if something similar to your project is already being done in the region. Because if they see a project come through and they think, well, this is already being done in X county or just next door, and what is the value add of another project, they'll want to see that. So that's another thing, is showing the value add of your project in a regional context. I think that's about all I'll add here. If there's additional information on the related market impacts of the project, that's one thing that our advisory board has asked for after pre-application stage to include in an application. So if there's those missing pieces of information, we'll ask for those in our feedback if your project is invited to apply. For the Timber for Transit program, this is common feedback after one round of the program. So understand that this will be growing as well, but I anticipate that a lot of the same feedback from like the Forest Economy Program and Catalyst program will apply here as well. First of all, I wanted to touch on the higher maximum award for the Timber for Transit program. So we offer up to $5 million in awards in a single award under the Timber for Transit program. And those projects requesting more than $1 million will be asked to justify by demonstrating alignment with 2 or more of the funding priorities of the program. By showing that their project has been identified by NBRC or a state as addressing a time-sensitive issue of magnitude or severity that will be addressed by the proposed project, and construction takes place in 2 or more eligible communities, counties, or states. So the same as the Catalyst program, where it's multiple jurisdictions, that applies for the Timber for Transit higher maximum as well. And those higher maximum eligibilities will be determined at the pre-application stage. The same goes here for the Timber for Transit program as the Forest Economy program in terms of clarifying ownership and clearly explaining how the NBRC funds will be used. Again, those NEPA timeline and budget considerations, and clear explanation of the economic impacts from the project. For the Timber for Transit program, you'll see in materials that we have a feasibility category and an implementation category. So feasibility projects might be an inventory analysis of bridges in a county that can utilize blue laminated timber, for example. For those projects, we're asking that you share the economic impact of implementation. So while your project is a feasibility study, what do you anticipate the economic impact would be from building those bridges? And it can be an estimate. And what we're looking for here is for you to draw the line from feasibility to implementation. How do you plan to get there, and what are those expected economic impacts? So we understand that a feasibility analysis won't result in 10 jobs, but do your best to make calculated estimates. And then once again, show alignment with state priorities as well. Great to connect with your state program manager on Timber for Transit projects. All right, what's next? We mentioned earlier in this webinar that August 2nd, next Friday, same time, same place, online, we'll be hosting a pre-application workshop. This is our second in the series, and we'll cover whether your project is ready for NBRC investment. So we'll kind of cover the pre-application process. Project readiness is a key component and piece of the scoring criteria, so we'll cover that as well. We have live pre-application office hours scheduled for Wednesdays in August, and you can see our events page, which is linked here for registration and details. We mentioned that early in August, the grants management system will be open for registration. So if you're not already registered in the system, you can go in early August. We don't have a set date yet, but you can go in then to register. And then August 15th is the date that the system will open for pre-applications. You'll want to view the Grant Management System, or GMS, pre-application guidance document and recorded office hours. And then September 6th is the big due date for pre-applications. Be sure to submit well before that 5 p.m. deadline. And again, the pre-applications must be submitted with any relevant waiver requests. So we have the significant benefit waiver, the LDD waiver for Catalyst pre-applicants, and then a 75% expenditure waiver. All of the information on those are in our program materials, so be sure to make sure you know what applies for your specific circumstances. All right, and a few key notes here. Registration is required for you to submit a pre-application. The pre-application is required in order to be invited to apply. And pre-application can only be associated with one funding program at a time. So for instance, you can't submit the same application to the Timber for Transit and Catalyst programs. And as always, don't wait until the last hour to submit your pre-application. I think it's a great idea to outline your responses in a separate Word document. Just be sure that there's not a ton of formatting because that doesn't transfer well into the grants management system. All right, and now we'll open it up for questions.
The chat box has been lively, so thank you for all of the engagement. And we're all kind of tag teaming responses. So if you have a question that you've asked that you have not had a response to yet, feel free to come live and ask it. But also, again, this is your time, so we'd love to hear any questions you have.
Matt, I see your hand is raised. Feel free to.
Hey, good morning. Thank you. Matt Lawless, Shelburne, Vermont. Are partial awards something that the agency has the discretion to make? Or do we need to like kind of calibrate the request carefully for an all or nothing award?
Well, certainly there's always a possibility of a partial award. It is the strong policy of NBRC that we do not make partial awards. I'm sure as an applicant, you can appreciate that. That can create obviously some ripple effects. So if you're asking, if you have $1 million project and you only receive 500, 600,000. So we make a strong effort to not make partial awards. So I hope that helps.
Thanks.
Donald, your hand is raised.
Yeah, sort of related to the prior question, it's more of a strategy question. Based on my previous questions about the larger maximum awards, we would qualify for 3 million. Strategically, is it wiser to apply for a smaller grant? Do you have a preference of us awarding a larger number of smaller grants versus a smaller number of larger grants?
So from the NBRC perspective, we don't have a preference. We encourage awards of all eligible sizes. There are only so many funds to go around, but some states end up with a small pool of awards. And some of those projects are larger $3 million projects. And some states end up with a larger slate of smaller projects. I really think in the end, it comes down to the competitiveness of your project and how well it meets priorities and how well it scores in our scoring process. So I'm happy to have any of the states come offline if there's more feedback that you want to share there. But I think from our process, it's really you put forward your project in the best way that helps you, and then it goes through the competition process, and we try to be transparent about how those decisions are made. Yeah.
Well, luckily my project is amazing and it satisfies all of the criteria you're looking for.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would say just it's a matter of reasonableness. So if that's a word, if your project, if you're requesting $3 million and 1.5 million of it is going to personnel costs. That might not be viewed well by our scorers looking for the economic impact. So just consider how your budget will be reviewed and what the funds are being spent on and the actual impact. Any other questions? Well, thank you all very much for your attention this morning. Keep an eye out for those other workshops that are upcoming. As we mentioned profusely throughout this presentation, there's a lot of resources available. If you need any help finding them or you have questions and they can't be answered in what's online, please feel free to reach out. That's what we're here for. And then on this question slide, we have a link to sign up for email updates. So if you're not already on our list, be sure to register. And thank you
Yes.
to our state partners as well for being online and available.
Yes, thank you to everybody and have a wonderful Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.